Welcome, sleep-deprived parents. Today we are entering the mysterious, often chaotic world of toddler bedtimes. If you've ever found yourself negotiating with a 3-foot-tall dictator at 9 p.m., or if your child's bedtime routine looks like a mix between like a circus act and a diplomatic summit, then you're in the right place. Today I'm going to show you 5 ways that you're unintentionally making bedtime worse. Now, whether you used to have a good bedtime routine and things have recently gotten chaotic, or maybe you've never had a great bedtime routine in place, the 5 things I'm going to show you today are going to be really eye-opening. Number 1, you are giving too much attention to your child's bad behavior. Now, this is a really big one, but in order to understand this, you've got to understand how important our parental attention is to our children. It is like gold to them. That is why they're always trying to get your attention to show you, a piece of artwork or something new they learned. And they're always saying, look at me, look at me. Because when your child can get your undivided attention and really get a rise out of you, it makes them feel powerful. So like during the day, if they're showing you how they learned to kick a soccer ball, you might be cheering and high-fiving them and they want to keep kicking the ball to you over and over again because they're getting your undivided attention. And they're getting a rise out of you. They can tell how proud you are of them. So it kind of keeps them engaged and keeps them wanting to do more and more of that. Well, at bedtime, the opposite thing can happen, but it can be just as impactful. Let me give you an example. Let's say it's the bedtime routine and your child refuses to sit in your lap to read books. Well, you try to be patient. You try to ask them nicely a few different ways to get them to come sit with you. Then eventually, after a few minutes, you might start to lose your patience. Maybe you raise your voice. Maybe you start to do like a countdown that we all know is never going to get to 0. Maybe you even get up and you start to kind of do a short little chase around the bed to try to scoop them up and then force them to sit in your lap. I mean, look how much attention you're giving your child for that bad behavior of not coming to sit down and read books. Look how much attention you're giving them. Now, it's negative attention because, you're frustrated, but still, you're giving them so much power and control in that situation. All of this negative attention strengthens behavior just like positive attention does. So if your bedtime routine is filled with examples of bad behavior that gets a ton of your attention, you can stop wondering why it keeps happening. It's because it's getting so much attention from you. Instead, lay on the praise for the good things that your child is doing during the bedtime routine, how well they move from one task to the next, and try to ignore the bad behavior because the less attention that it gets from you, the better. Number 2, bedtime lacks boundaries. Boundaries are limits or expectations that we set up as parents so that our kids stay safe and healthy and on track. And I kind of like to think of boundaries like bumpers at the bowling alley. When you take your kids bowling, if you don't have those bumpers in the gutter, their ball is never going to make it down to the pins. It's going to fall into the gutter every time. So it's kind of the same thing with boundaries. Boundaries are like those bumpers, and our kid is kind of like the bowling ball, right? So without the bumpers, they have no chance of getting to the pins, all right? They're going to fall into the gutter every time. But we put those bumpers up, those boundaries up to help keep them on track. And bedtime needs bumpers. Your kid needs some freedom and the ability to make some choices during the bedtime routine. Just like a bowling ball is going to roll to the left or the right, but you, the parent, have to be there to be the bumpers because the end goal, the pins, is having lights out at an age-appropriate time. So you're trying to get your kid, the bowling ball, all the way down to the pins, which is an age-appropriate lights-out time. And without those bumpers, kids are going to stall and stall and stall and stall, and it's going to push that bedtime way too late, way past the ideal time, and then it's actually going to make sleep much more difficult for them. Number 3, pushing bedtime later so they'll be more tired. Listen, I get it. Parents can be as bad at stalling bedtime as kids can be, and it makes sense. I mean, if you know that putting your kid to bed is going to be like World War III, you're in no hurry to get started. But the idea that if you wait a little bit later to put your kid to bed, that it's going to be easier because they're going to be more tired, that's 100% false. Kids under 6 years old should be asleep by 8 p.m. So when you push bedtime too late, what actually happens is kids get a rush of a stress hormone called cortisol That actually gives them a second wind so they can fight going to sleep even more. So waiting later makes bedtime more difficult for everyone. And if they have that late night cortisol rush, that can actually screw up the quality of their sleep and can actually lead to them waking up overnight. Number 4, having an inconsistent routine. Kids really thrive on routine. Having some consistency in their day and knowing what to expect really helps to make them feel secure. And the same goes for the bedtime routine. So, really, the smoothest and the easiest and the quickest and the most enjoyable bedtime routines are exactly that, pretty routine, where both the child and the parent understand what the steps are in the routine and move through them easily every night. Something like brush your teeth, put your PJs on, go potty, read 2 books, sing 1 song, lights out. Problems come in when the bedtime routine is all over the place. Like sometimes the steps are inconsistent. They're not the same every night. Or sometimes we just do them in a totally different order. Maybe some nights we skip teeth. Or some nights maybe we go downstairs and say goodnight to mom before we sing a song. Or some nights we read 1 book, some nights we read 3 books. Or sometimes different parents have totally different bedtime routines. The reason why this is an issue is because the child doesn't know what to expect. And they may start to get upset because things aren't going the way that they thought they were going to go, or they might start asking for more and more things because it just kind of feels out of control. And at a time of day where kids are already tired, this feeling of being out of control, like there's no structure, it's not reassuring, it's not calming, and it's not a great way to start the bedtime. Now, let me point out that most families have like a stated bedtime routine. But if you're honest, it's kind of become more of an aspiration than a reality. Like I hear this all the time. Families will say, we've had the same bedtime routine for 2 years, but he just won't follow along with it. Well, that's not a routine. To set up a real routine, try talking to your child about it. Map out some steps, map out a plan that you both are going to enjoy. That's going to give you a lot more likelihood that they're going to move through it easily so that you can really have a routine bedtime routine. Okay, the 5th way that you are unintentionally making bedtime worse is by diverting off course. So this goes back to one of my favorite sayings about parenting, which is give an inch and they'll take a mile. So as I've said, kids thrive on routine. So once you set up a good bedtime routine and you're like in the flow and you're getting used to, doing all the steps the same every single night, when your kid asks, if you're reading 2 books every night, and then all of a sudden your kid asks for a 3rd book, you might be tempted to say, sure, like bedtime's been going great. I'll just read a 3rd book. But I encourage you to say, nope, we only read 2 books for bedtime. But why don't we do this? Let's put that book in the pile, and that'll be one of the 2 books that we read tomorrow night. Doing this really holds up those boundaries, those bumpers that I talked about earlier. I know it may seem like a small thing to change things up or, add an extra book in or sing an extra song when your child's had a really good day or they're being good or they're being sweet. But it's these little changes that are going to get kids curious about what else they could ask for. So it's just a slippery slope. I say, once you set up those bumpers for that bedtime routine, you don't want them coming off. So once you set those boundaries, stick to them. Now, I'm not saying that you can never change the bedtime routine. It's not like, once you set it when your child's 3 years old, it's set in concrete and it's that way for life. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is if you want to change it, do it intentionally and don't do it in the moment. Don't do it when you're like giving in to just your kids begging. So here's what I mean. Let's say your kid is constantly nagging you for 3 books every bedtime routine. Here's what you can do. The next day, like during the day, not at the bedtime routine, acknowledge it. Say, honey, you keep asking to read 3 books at night. And I hear you. If that's something that you really want to do, then we need to remove something else from the bedtime routine because if we read 3 books, it's going to take too long. So are you okay if we skip singing lullabies and instead we'll read the 3 books? What you're doing is you're having a conversation with your child. You're letting her feel heard, like, you're hearing what she's saying, and you're also giving her the power to make some choices. So you're giving her some control, which is going to go a long way to making bedtime run very smoothly, all while keeping those bumpers firmly in place. To learn even more about what's going on at bedtime and to help you solve those overnight wake ups, Join me in my next free toddler sleep masterclass. You can save your spot at toddlersleepmasterclass.com.